Now I'm going to tell you about something. About James Calloway, the Duke of Blackwell. About the most talked about man in London, the most sought after, the most desired. 23 years old, titled, handsome, wealthy, and fully aware of every one of those things. Until that day, only one thing had been missing from his life. The word no. That morning, James was sitting at the large dining table in his London house. In front of him were his coffee, his newspaper, and a letter he had no desire to read. A family vineyard estate, in the north, out in the countryside. Some legal issue had come up. Deeds, boundaries, who knew what else? The lawyer could not settle it alone. James had to go in person. James set the letter down on the table. "When will you be leaving, sir?" his valet asked. "I am not leaving." "Sir, the lawyer said, send someone else. No one else can sign, sir. The deed is in your name." James drank his coffee. He looked at the newspaper. He read the letter again. Then he stood up. "Prepare the carriage." They set out early in the morning, James and 2 men with him. As they moved farther from London, the noise of the city gave way to silence. The roads narrowed. The trees grew denser. James lay back in the carriage, his hat pulled down over his eyes, trying to sleep. One of his men, Thomas, who had been with him for years, was looking out the window. "It is actually quite a lovely place, sir. I have never looked at it that way. At least the air is clean." "I did not come here for clean air, Thomas." "Of course, sir." James pulled his hat a little lower. They entered the town before noon. James lifted his hat and looked outside. Small, ordinary, quiet. A single main street lined on both sides with wooden buildings. A blacksmith, a bakery, an inn. People walking, talking, knowing one another. Everyone knew everyone. "How long will this take?" James asked. "The lawyer will be ready this afternoon, sir. Perhaps 2 hours." "We will finish it in 2 hours and leave." As the carriage moved down the main street, James looked outside again, out of habit, out of boredom, because there was nothing else to do. And then he saw her. She was standing in front of the schoolhouse. An elderly man was beside her, carrying several things in his hands. They looked heavy. The girl took the load from him in one smooth motion, without a second thought. Then she said something to him. James could not hear it, but the man laughed, nodded, and squeezed her hand as if thanking her. James's eyes caught on her face. The carriage kept moving. James did not turn around, but he raised his hand. "Stop." The carriage stopped. Thomas leaned forward. "Sir." James was still looking that way. The girl had seen the old man off, and now she was walking toward the school door. She did not look back. She did not look back. "How far is the vineyard estate?" he asked. "Half an hour, sir. We will see the lawyer today. We will return tomorrow." Thomas said nothing, but he looked at the other man. The other man looked out the window, saw the girl, and understood. The carriage began moving again. He was supposed to stay in town for 2 hours. He stayed for 3 weeks. That afternoon, James handled his business with the lawyer. The papers were signed, hands were shaken, and the matter was closed. They should have left. But James settled into the vineyard house. Thomas said not a word as he carried in the luggage. He recognized the expression on James's face. The next morning, James rose early, ate breakfast, dressed, and looked at himself in the mirror. "There is a school in town," he said to Thomas. "Yes, sir. We saw it yesterday." "I wonder who the teacher is." "I do not know, sir." "I should like to find out." "At the school, sir?" "In town. In general." James straightened his coat. "We have come all this way. We may as well get to know the place." Thomas said nothing. As he held the door, he coughed softly. James walked into town, alone, without the carriage. Even that was unusual. But using a carriage here would have been ridiculous. Everything was within 10 minutes. A few people along the main street looked at him. James greeted them, and they returned the greeting. He reached the schoolhouse. The door was open. Inside, he could hear a woman's voice, clear, steady, teaching a lesson. James stopped and listened. Geography, the rivers of England. Then he stepped inside. It was a small classroom. There were around 15 children. At the front of the blackboard stood the girl he had seen the day before. She was young, plainly dressed, her hair simply pinned up. There was a piece of chalk in her hand. She turned and saw James. Even if she was surprised, she recovered at once. "May I help you?" The children turned. James smiled. "My apologies," he said. "I have only just arrived in town. I am staying at the Vineyard House. I wanted to acquaint myself with the area, and the door was open." "There is a lesson in progress," the girl said. "You may return this afternoon. My father will be here." "Of course, pardon me." James left. He paused for a moment outside the door. Inside, the girl's voice began again, as if he had never come at all. He returned in the afternoon. Her father was there. Fletcher, the town's teacher, a white-haired man with a warm face. James introduced himself. The Vineyard House, the legal matter, staying a few days. The father welcomed him kindly. The girl was there too. She was in one corner, looking over some papers. She glanced at James, dipped her head, and returned to her work. James spoke with her father. About the town, the school, the children. At one point, the girl stood up and brought tea to her father. Then she held a cup out to James as well. "Thank you." "You are welcome." That was all. As he was leaving, James stopped. "Excuse me." The girl lifted her head. "May I know your name?" "Eleanor," the girl said. "Eleanor Marsh." James Calloway." Eleanor inclined her head. "Good evening, Mr. Calloway." And she returned to her papers. James stepped outside. He was the Duke of Blackwell himself. He sat in the House of Lords, and women blushed at the sound of his name. This girl had called him Mr. Calloway, and gone back to her papers. At dinner, Thomas asked, "How was the town, sir?" James considered the question. "Interesting. Yes." He took up his wine. "I may walk through it again tomorrow." Thomas said nothing. The next day, James went again, and the day after that. Eleanor was always the same, polite, brief, and then back to her work. And with every passing day, James found himself more astonished. By the third day, Thomas could no longer hold back. "Sir, the matter with the lawyer is finished. There is business waiting in London, and Lady Victoria has sent word twice. I know. When are we returning?" James looked out the window toward the town. "Soon." Thomas left, because he knew that this soon meant absolutely nothing. On the fourth day, James went down to town again. This time, he had his excuse prepared. He would have something to eat at the inn, stroll a little. It did not sound particularly convincing, even to him. He saw Eleanor on the main street. She was speaking with an elderly woman. The woman's basket was heavy. Eleanor took it from her. The woman protested. Eleanor laughed, said something, and the woman laughed too. Then they walked together. James stopped and watched. Eleanor carried the basket all the way to the door. The woman came back out with a small jar. Eleanor did not wish to take it. The woman insisted. At last, Eleanor accepted it in such a way that the woman did not feel indebted, only pleased. James noticed that. Then Eleanor turned and saw James. "Mr. Calloway." "Miss Marsh," The weather is lovely today. Yes. Good day. And she walked on. James watched her go. Then he sat down on the bench outside the inn and thought, how many times in my life has a woman said good day to me and simply kept walking? The answer was none. The next day, James tried something. He sent a fine decorative box from London to Eleanor's house. Inside were chocolates selected from the best confectioner. He wrote no note, just the box. The next morning, James was drinking coffee in the garden when Eleanor arrived. She was holding the box. James stood up. Miss Marsh, I was not expecting. Eleanor held out the box. Thank you. James did not take it. It is for you. I know, but it was not necessary. Why not? It is only a small... Mr. Calloway. Her voice was calm, clear. I do not need anything. James stopped. Thank you, truly. It was a kind gesture. She set the box down on the table. But I will not accept it. She turned away. James called after her. Why? Eleanor stopped and turned back. Because I do not have to accept it, she said. Good day. And she left. James sat at the table. The box was still in front of him. Thomas came over. He looked at the box, then at James. Without asking a single question, he sat down across from him. After a while, James said, Do you know what this woman wants, Thomas? I do not, sir. Neither do I. She says she wants nothing. Perhaps that is true. Nonsense. Everyone wants something. Thomas considered that. Perhaps this woman has learned not to want. James lifted his head and looked at him. Shall I bring more coffee, sir? Bring it. On the 8th day, James went down into town again. This time, there was no gift and no excuse. He found Eleanor in the schoolyard, arranging chairs by herself. Let me help. There is no need. I know. James picked up a chair. I will help anyway. Eleanor paused for a moment, then continued. They worked in silence. When they finished, Eleanor said, Thank you. You are welcome. James left. That day, for the first time, there was a small difference in Eleanor's voice. James noticed it. On the 9th day, James turned to Thomas. Send word to London. I shall remain here a few more weeks. Thomas said nothing. This time, he did not even cough. On the 10th day, James realized something. Nothing he had tried before had worked. The smile had not come. The gift had been returned, and rank meant absolutely nothing in Eleanor's eyes. So either he would give up, or he would try another way. James Calloway had never given up on anything in his life. That evening, as Eleanor was crossing the town square, James saw her and caught up with her. They walked side by side. There had been no invitation, but there had been no objection either. Mr. Calloway. Miss Marsh. They walked a few steps in silence. Normally, James would have said something light, something witty at this point. This time, he did not. How long have you lived in this town? He asked. Eleanor looked mildly surprised. Since the day I was born. You have never left? A few times, only briefly. Have you ever been to London? Once, with my father. She paused. I did not like it. Why? It is too crowded, too noisy. Everyone is rushing somewhere, but no one seems to know where they are rushing to. James said nothing, because the sentence was true. What is here, then? He asked after a moment. It was not criticism. It was a real question. Eleanor thought for a moment. Then she looked at the town. Do you see that bakery? Hartley's Bakery. It has belonged to the same family for 70 years. It opens at the same hour every morning, and every morning the same scent comes out of it. James looked. That tree, Eleanor said. The oldest tree in town. Everyone has hung something on it. Wishes, notes, ribbons. No one ever says what they placed there, but everyone knows who placed what. James looked at the tree. Its branches really were full of faded ribbons and old scraps of paper. And that house on the corner, it looks empty, but it is not. A 90-year-old woman lives inside it. Every Friday morning, she opens her window and looks outside for an hour. Why? I do not know. I never asked. Some things are better left unasked. They kept walking. This time, James listened more than he spoke. As Eleanor talked, the town changed. It stopped being an ordinary place and became somewhere that carried a story in every corner. At one point, Eleanor asked, "And you? What do you do in London?" James paused. Normally, he had a ready answer. Business, meetings, social obligations. But here, that answer felt empty. "A great many things," he said, "but at the moment, I do not wish to remember any of them." Eleanor looked at him. She said nothing, but she kept walking. After they parted, James stopped in the road on his way back to the vineyard house. That evening had been different. He had not played a part, and he had not shown off. He had simply talked, and Eleanor had walked beside him for 15 minutes. The next day, James went again. This time, Eleanor was in the school garden, looking over the pots the children had planted. "What are these?" James asked. "Mint. This one is a little wilted." "Why?" "Too much water." She lifted her head. Even too much of a good thing can sometimes do harm. James heard that. Eleanor was talking about the plant, but she was not speaking only about the plant. "Do you know a great deal about plants?" "A little. My father taught me. My mother knew more." "Your mother?" "She passed away. Long ago." She said it briefly. "She started this garden. We keep it going." James wanted to apologize or to offer some comfort, but there was a calmness in Eleanor's face that told him she did not need either. She was not at war with her past. He fell silent. Eleanor moved to another pot. "Have you ever grown anything?" "No." "Not once?" "There is no garden in London." Eleanor looked at him. "You said you had a large house. There is a garden, but the gardeners take care of it." Eleanor thought for a moment. "So you have never held soil in your own hands?" "No." "How interesting." She turned back to the plants. "When you grow something yourself, it feels different. I suppose it is because it takes time. Things that come easily have no value." James heard that sentence too. The days passed. Every day brought a conversation. Sometimes short, sometimes long. Eleanor told him the history of the town. It had once been a mining town. The mine had died, but the people had remained. She spoke of a book by a French traveler. James had never read it, but now he wanted to. One afternoon, the town's elderly blacksmith was unable to repair something. Eleanor stopped, looked, and said a few things. The man tried again, and this time it worked. James was standing beside her. "Do you understand blacksmithing as well?" "No," Eleanor said, "but I know how Fletcher thinks. When you pull the problem in a different direction, it resolves itself." James laughed. He truly laughed. Not for effect, not for show, but naturally. Eleanor turned and looked at him. There was a small note of surprise on her face. "What?" James asked. "Nothing," Eleanor said. But there was something. The wall was still there. James knew that. And yet, for the first time, he felt a movement in it. That evening at the vineyard house, Thomas asked, "When are we returning to London, sir?" James was looking out the window toward the town. "I do not know, Thomas. Lady Victoria sends word every day." "I know." "Lord Pemberton called as well." "Parliament." "Thomas." "Yes, sir." "Be quiet tomorrow." Thomas left. James remained by the window. The town had gone dark, and the lamps were lit. Somewhere in it, was Eleanor's house. Small, modest, with the plants she had built with her mother in the garden. Things that come easily have no value. James thought about that sentence. Then, for the first time, he asked himself something. Had I ever truly made an effort for anything in my life? The answer was uncomfortable. It was the 14th day in town. James was still there. On the 15th day, Thomas carried the luggage to the carriage. James paused for a moment in the doorway of the vineyard house. It was a small, ordinary place, somewhere he had never liked. But now, he wanted to stay a little longer. At last, he turned and got into the carriage. They drove through the town. James had decided not to look out the window. They entered the main street, passed the bakery, reached the square. Then it became impossible not to see. Eleanor was in the square. She was carrying papers and books. She must have been taking something for the school. When she saw the carriage, she looked up. Then she saw James. James gave a small nod. Eleanor stopped. She looked at him. Then she smiled. It was a brief smile, but a real one. The carriage passed on. James turned forward. He did not look back. Thomas said nothing. They arrived in London by late afternoon. The city was as it always was, noisy, crowded, rushing. James stepped out of the carriage. The door of the house opened. The servants came out. The luggage was taken in. Everything was ready, in place, automatic. It was exactly as Eleanor had said. Everyone was rushing somewhere, but no one seemed to know where they were rushing to. Victoria arrived at 8 o'clock that evening. As always, she was beautiful. Her hair was flawless. Her dress was flawless. Her smile was flawless. When she saw James, she kissed both his cheeks. At last, I have heard nothing from you for 2 weeks. The matter took longer than expected. Never mind. There is a party at the Hartleys tonight, and we are going. You have 10 minutes. James went, changed, and returned. The Hartleys' house was full. Music, wine, laughter, the usual faces, the usual conversations. Lord Ashton came over. Blackwell, where on earth have you been? You have not been seen at the club. I was in the country. The country. What were you doing in the country? A matter concerning the vineyard house. Did you settle it? I did. Ashton kept talking. James was listening, but part of his mind was elsewhere. It was in the town square, in the tree with its faded ribbons hanging from the branches. Blackwell? James turned. What was I saying? Ashton asked. I do not know, James said honestly. Ashton laughed. The drink must have gotten to you. James looked at his glass, then around the room. Everyone was talking. Who had been seen with whom? Who had failed to invite whom? Which color was fashionable this season? Across the room, Victoria was speaking with Lady Pembridge, and both of them looked flawless. James looked at those smiles. Then he remembered what Eleanor had said to the blacksmith. When you pull the problem in a different direction, it resolves itself. And he thought of that moment when he had truly laughed. When had he last truly laughed in this room? He could not remember. Days passed. James returned to his affairs. Meetings, documents, the House of Lords. His life went back to normal. Everything was in its place. But it felt wrong. As he drank his coffee in the morning, he found himself thinking of Hartley's bakery. The same recipe for 70 years, the same scent every morning. In London, even his coffee tasted different every day. While sitting in his library, he thought of the French traveler Eleanor had mentioned. He owned thousands of books, yet could not truly remember any of them. One day, he went out into the garden. The gardeners were working. What are those plants? He asked. The man looked surprised. Which ones, sir? Those. The smaller ones. Mint, sir. James bent down and touched one of the leaves. While the gardener stared at him in confusion, James straightened and went back inside. Victoria noticed. One evening, while they were dining alone, James drifted off again. Victoria stopped mid-conversation. "James?" "I am asking you something." James looked at her. "What did you ask?" Victoria set down her glass. "What happened in the country?" "Nothing. You have been different ever since you came back." "I am only tired." Victoria fell silent, but her gaze did not. It was a searching gaze, a calculating one. James looked down at the table. "It is a lovely evening. Was there music anywhere tonight?" Victoria looked at him for another moment. Then she said, "At the Forsyths." "Then let us go." So they went. On the morning of the 16th day, James rose early, dressed, and came downstairs. Thomas was preparing coffee. "Good morning, sir. Before noon today, Lord Carrington." "Thomas." "Yes, sir." "Prepare the carriage." Thomas stopped. "You have a meeting, sir." "Postpone it." "Lady Victoria this evening." "Thomas." Thomas looked at him. "Prepare the carriage." There was silence. "Where are we going, sir?" James did not answer. He took his coat and walked to the door. Thomas watched him from behind. Then he went outside. There was no need to ask where they were going. He knew. The carriage left London. James leaned against the window. For the first time in 2 weeks, he breathed easily. By the time they reached the town, it was afternoon. James stepped down. The bakery, the square, the tree, the schoolhouse, everything that had been unfamiliar 2 weeks ago now felt known to him. He walked on. Eleanor was in the schoolyard. She was gathering chairs by herself. James stepped through the gate. Eleanor turned, saw him, and stopped. This time, she did not hide her surprise. "You again?" "Yes." "Business?" "No." Silence. Eleanor looked at him for another second. Then she went back to her work. James picked up a chair as well. Eleanor looked at him, but said nothing. The two of them gathered the chairs in silence. This time, James did not push. Days passed. Sometimes he saw Eleanor. Sometimes he did not. Sometimes they met in the square and exchanged a few words. Sometimes days passed without them meeting at all. James sat at the vineyard house, read, walked, drank tea with the town's old blacksmith. Naturally, the blacksmith was curious. "Do you not like London?" he asked. "I do," James said. Then he corrected himself. "I used to." The blacksmith laughed. "What is here that London does not have?" James thought about it. He did not answer. But inwardly, he knew the answer. On the 19th day, the school door was closed. James noticed it in the morning. It was still closed in the afternoon. That was strange. Eleanor opened the school every day. He asked a woman passing by. "The teacher is ill," the woman said. "His daughter is caring for him." "How long has he been ill?" 2 days. He has a fever, they say." James returned to the vineyard house. He sat down, got up again, looked out the window. There was something he could do. But if he brought food, Eleanor would turn it away. If he knocked on the door, she would not leave her sick father. If he sent money, she would never accept it. Then something occurred to him. He called for Thomas. "Go to London," he said. "Today. Find Dr. Hartwell. There is a sick old man in town. I want him here tomorrow." Thomas looked at him. "Dr. Hartwell is very expensive, sir." "I know. Go. Shall I tell him your name?" James thought for a moment. "No." Thomas understood. He left. Dr. Hartwell arrived the next day. He went straight to the Marsh house. James sat at the vineyard house. There was a book in his hand, but he was not reading it. Hours passed. At last, Thomas returned. "The doctor has left, sir. The father is well enough, nothing dangerous. He left medicine." "All right." Miss Eleanor asked who had sent the doctor. James looked at him. "And what did the doctor say?" "He told her, sir. Your name." James said nothing. Evening fell. James was sitting on the bench in the small garden of the vineyard house. The air was cold. He did not care. He heard footsteps. Eleanor was coming. She looked tired. There were dark circles beneath her eyes. But she stood straight. James was about to rise. Eleanor stopped in front of the gate. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was even, neither angry nor soft. She was simply asking. James could have given her an easy answer, a kind one, a proper one, a safe one, but he could not give her that. "Because I wanted to," he said. Eleanor looked at him. "What do you want in return?" James paused for a moment. This question was coming for the first time, because this time it was not about him. It was about her father. Eleanor could not brush it aside. James looked back at her. "Nothing," he said. Eleanor did not look away. "Everyone wants something." "I know. You do too, perhaps," James said, "but not tonight." Silence. Eleanor looked at him for a long time, weighed him, measured him, waited. James did not explain. He did not retreat. He simply remained where he was. Then Eleanor turned and walked to the gate. She placed her hand on the handle and stopped. She did not turn back, but she stopped. It seemed as though she wanted to say something. Then she opened the gate and went inside. James remained on the bench. What had just happened? Eleanor had not thanked him. She had not refused him. She had simply paused. All his life, James had known how to read women's glances, smiles, blushes, but he did not recognize this hesitation. He had never seen it before. Thomas called from inside. "Sir, supper is ready." James rose, went inside, and sat at the table. But his mind was still at that gate, in that single second. The next morning, the school door was open. Eleanor was inside, teaching. James saw her through the window. He did not go in, but he smiled. Days passed. They were good days. James did not fully understand that at the time. He would understand it later. For now, he was simply living them. He rose in the morning, went down to town, saw Eleanor. Sometimes in the schoolyard, sometimes in the square, sometimes on an evening walk. They talked. Now they were truly talking. About books, the history of the town, the children, things her father had said, the opera James had attended in London and had never liked. Eleanor laughed at the opera story. She truly laughed. When James heard that laugh, something stirred inside him. He only wanted to hear it more. One evening, they were sitting side by side in the square. Eleanor stopped in the middle of speaking. "I have never understood you," she said. "In what way?" "In London, you have everything. Why are you still here?" James thought about it. Then he answered honestly. "Because I feel different here." "How different?" "Less tired." Eleanor looked at him. "Does London tire you?" "Everything there tires me. The people, the conversations, the expectations." James placed his hands on his knees. "Here, no one expects anything from me." Eleanor said nothing, but she looked at him. This time, there was something different in that look. Something real. A few more days passed. Eleanor was a little more open now. Still cautious, still measuring every word. But she stayed beside James longer, spoke more. Sometimes, when James said something, a small, involuntary smile would appear on her face before she answered. James saw all of it. One day, Eleanor mentioned one of her father's old books, a book she loved with a torn cover, whose second edition she had been searching for years. James kept that in mind. The next day, he sent Thomas to London. His only task was to find that book. Thomas found it in 3 days. James did not give the book to Eleanor directly. He left it on the wall of the schoolyard. On top of it, he placed a small note. "I found it in Fletcher's library. It should be yours." It was a lie, but there was no other way if he wanted to prevent Eleanor from sending it back. The next day, when Eleanor saw James, she stopped. She looked at him. She said nothing, but she thanked him, for the first time, without refusing. That evening, James sat in the vineyard house and understood, for the first time in his life, that a woman's gratitude could weigh this heavily. That night, he could not sleep for a long time, because there was only one thing in his mind: Victoria. In London, inside his flawless life, the woman their families approved of. They were already discussing a wedding date. James had always known that. But while he was in the country, London had felt far away, like another life. Tonight, for the first time, it felt close. James stared at the ceiling. He had to tell Eleanor. One day, somehow, at the right moment. He would tell her tomorrow, or the day after. The right moment never came. It was the evening of the 28th day. James was returning to the vineyard house. He met Eleanor in the square. They began walking side by side. By now, it was as it always was. Easy, comfortable. Even the silences no longer felt awkward. Then the sound of a fast horse broke through the air. They both turned. It was a young man from London, Robert, one of James's men. He was out of breath. The moment he entered the town, he began asking, "Where is the Duke of Blackwell? There is an urgent message." James was about to go to him. At that moment, the old servant from the inn lifted her head. "The Duke of Blackwell? Is it from his fiancée? Is the lady ill?" The world stopped. James heard that word. His fiancée. He turned. Eleanor looked frozen. Her eyes were no longer looking at anything. She was simply letting what she had heard fall into place. "Eleanor," James said. Eleanor looked at him. There was no anger in that look. The surprise was gone as well. There was only the quiet certainty of something being confirmed. "You have a fiancé," Eleanor said. Her voice was flat. "Eleanor, listen. You have a fiancé." James tried to speak. "What there is between Victoria and me, it was a family arrangement. I never..." Eleanor only looked at him, and James fell silent. Because no matter what he said, the truth did not change. He had a fiancée. For a month, he had been walking with Eleanor, talking with her, standing beside her, and he had never said a word about it. "Go," Eleanor said. "Eleanor, please go." She did not shout. She did not cry. That made it worse. James took a step toward her. Eleanor did not step back, but she closed her eyes for a moment, as though if she looked at him, something would happen, and she would not allow it. Then she opened her eyes. James understood. The door had closed. That wall that had only just begun to crack. Those small smiles. That gratitude. Those hesitations. All of it had closed again, with a single word. "Fiancé." James turned and walked away. Robert caught up with him and held out the message. James took it, but he did not open it. He went to the vineyard house. He sat down at the table. The unopened message lay in front of him. Thomas came in, looked at him, and asked nothing. James kept staring at the table. Eleanor was right. It was that simple. He had been going to tell her. Every night, he had said to himself, "Tomorrow I will tell her. I will tell her when the right moment comes. The right moment never came. Because for the first time in his life, James Calloway had been afraid of losing something, and that fear had kept him from being honest. That night, the town was quiet. The light in Eleanor's house stayed on until late. James watched it from the window of the vineyard house. When the light finally went out, he closed his eyes. The next morning, he packed his things. Thomas had seen what happened the day before. Even so, he asked nothing. He only prepared the luggage. The carriage was waiting at the door. As James stepped out, he turned once and looked at the town. The square was empty. Hartley's bakery was open. The school was still closed. He got into the carriage. London. The carriage began to move. London received him coldly. The house was the same. Large, silent, flawless. The servants were waiting at the door. The luggage was taken inside. James went straight to his study. He sat at his desk. In front of him were letters, documents, notes from the House of Lords. He touched none of them. Thomas brought tea. He set it down and left. James looked at the tea. It went cold. Victoria came that afternoon. As always, she was flawless. James received her in the drawing room. Victoria sat down, looked at James's face, and saw everything. "When did it happen?" she asked. "When did what happen?" "When you understood." James thought for a moment. "I do not know." Slowly, Victoria lowered her head. James spoke plainly. "Victoria, we cannot marry." The room fell silent. Victoria did not change her expression. She did not cry. She did not shout. She only sat there and thought. "Who is she?" she asked at last. "It does not matter." "It matters to me." "Someone in the country." James paused. "But that is not the point. I cannot marry you, Victoria. The reason is not that woman. The reason is me." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she rose and walked to the window. "All right," she said. James waited. "But you will not be the one to explain the separation." Victoria turned back. Her voice was cold. "I will explain it. You left me. That is how it will remain." "Why?" "Because that is what I want." She adjusted her gloves. "Being left by the Duke of Blackwell is not the end for me, but being the one who was left is a better story for this season." It was cold, calculated, but honest. "All right," James said. Victoria walked to the door. She stopped. Then, without turning back, she spoke. "I never loved you, James. You knew that." "I knew." "You never loved me either." "No." There was a short silence. "Then it is the right decision for both of us," Victoria said. She closed the door. James went to the window. He looked out at London. Down below, carriages were passing. People were walking. Life was continuing. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Victoria was gone. The engagement was over. James was free now, but Eleanor was still in the country, and James did not have a single word that could persuade her. Because Eleanor was right, he had hidden it. He had failed to tell her for a month. What could he say now? That evening, Thomas came in. "Dinner is ready, sir." James turned. "Thomas." "Yes, sir." "Have you ever truly lost something important?" Thomas thought for a moment. "Yes, sir." "What did you do?" "What could I do? I waited. Sometimes waiting is the only thing one can do. And if it never comes back, then you still wait. But at least you know you tried to go after it." James looked at him. Thomas walked toward the door. "Do not let your dinner grow cold, sir." 3 days passed. James returned to his affairs, mechanically. He read the letters, signed the papers, attended the meetings. His body was there. His mind was not. On the morning of the 4th day, he came downstairs. Thomas was in the kitchen. "Prepare the carriage," James said. "Sir, today the House of Lords postpone it." Lord Carrington himself. "Thomas." Thomas fell silent. James spoke plainly. "Eleanor Marsh may reject me. Most likely, she will. She may not open the door. She may never forgive me." Thomas said nothing. "But before I leave it behind, I have to try one more thing." James straightened his coat. "Prepare the carriage." Thomas said nothing. He went outside and prepared the carriage. The carriage left London. This time, James did not lean against the window. He sat upright. There was only one question in his mind. Will Eleanor open the door? He did not know. But this time, he was truly going. No luggage, no excuse, no business. He was simply going. Before they reached the town, James turned to Thomas. "Return to London." Thomas looked at him. "Sir?" "Call the lawyer. Call Pemberton. The social calendar. The parliamentary obligations. All of it. Transfer what can be transferred. Postpone what can be postponed." He paused. "And the deed to the vineyard house is to be placed in my own name as well. Have that settled." Thomas did not move. "For how long, sir?" "Indefinitely." The carriage had stopped. Outside was silence. The entrance to the town, the familiar road, the familiar trees. Thomas looked at him for a long moment. "You are moving here," he said. "Yes." "Does Miss Eleanor know?" "No. Will she accept you?" James opened the carriage door and stepped down. He took his small case. "I do not know," he said, "but this time, at least, I am truly here." The carriage turned around and returned to London. James walked alone to the vineyard house. The vineyard house was small. He had stayed there before, but always temporarily. Now he stepped inside, set down his case, and looked around. A small kitchen, 2 rooms, a garden. It was enough. James rose early the next morning. He dressed plainly and walked into town. He stepped into the grocer's shop. The old man looked surprised when he saw him. "Mr. Calloway, it has been a long time since we last saw you." "I have returned," James said. "Do you have any bread?" "Of course. I will take 1 loaf, and some coffee as well." He took them, paid, and walked out. Fletcher was standing in the doorway. "Calloway, when did you return?" "Yesterday." "How long will you be staying this time?" James thought for a moment. "For a while." Fletcher nodded. "Would you care for some coffee? The shop has warmed up since morning." "I would." They went inside. They sat at the blacksmith's bench and drank coffee together. They spoke of the weather, of the coming winter. It was an ordinary morning. James could not remember the last time he had lived through an ordinary morning. Eleanor saw him on the 3rd day. She was looking out through the school window. James was walking across the square. He was carrying something he had bought from the bakery. He was walking without hurry, without trying to reach anywhere. Eleanor froze. She had thought he was gone. He was supposed to be gone, but he was there. She stepped back from the window. A day passed. Eleanor tried to ignore him. That was difficult, because the town was small. She saw him in the square, in front of the grocer's shop, and coming out of Fletcher's shop. James did not ignore her, but neither did he approach her. When he saw her from a distance, he inclined his head, greeted her, and kept walking. He was waiting. He was not putting pressure on her. 2 days later, Eleanor heard it from someone else as well. The servant from the inn was speaking at the grocer's. He has settled into the vineyard house. The deed has even been transferred into his own name. It seems permanent. Eleanor stopped. Permanent? That is what they are saying. Eleanor went home. She said nothing to her father. She cooked, washed the dishes, corrected lessons, but nothing felt normal. A week passed. James was still there. Every morning, he came into town, did his shopping, sat with Fletcher, spoke with the innkeeper. He was a burden to no one, and he disturbed no one. The townspeople, too, were beginning to grow used to him. One day, he was tending the garden of the vineyard house. He was trimming the shrubs with his own hands. A passerby stopped. "Hire a gardener, Mr. Calloway. Why trouble yourself with it?" James looked at his hands. They were covered in soil. "I wanted to do it myself," he said. The man shrugged and walked on. James kept working. Eleanor's words came back to him. When you grow something yourself, it feels different. On the 8th day, Eleanor could bear it no longer. It was evening. James, as usual, was sitting on the bench in front of the vineyard house. Eleanor was on her way home. She stopped. James saw her. He did not rise. He did not approach. He waited. There were 10 steps between them. "Your fiancé," Eleanor said. Her voice was flat. "What happened?" "It ended." "When?" "As soon as I returned." Silence. "Why?" Eleanor asked. James looked at her. "You know the answer. I want to know it. I want to hear it from you." James stood up, but he did not come closer. "Because that life was not my life," he said, "and you showed me that, without even realizing it." Eleanor did not blink. "You did not tell me for an entire month." "Yes." "Why?" James looked at her directly. "Because I was afraid of losing something." "Me?" "You." The wind passed between them. The town was quiet. Eleanor looked at him for a long time, with that old gaze of hers, weighing, measuring. Then she turned and walked home. James remained where he was, but this time she had not driven him away. She had not told him to go. She had not shouted. She had simply turned away. That was different. James sat down on the bench again. He looked up at the sky. He was waiting. On the morning of the 9th day, James was working in the garden. He heard the sound of the gate. He turned. Eleanor was standing at the garden gate. She was holding 2 cups of tea. She held one of them out. James took it. The 2 of them sat quietly in the garden. Nothing had been resolved yet, but Eleanor was there, and she had brought tea. It was a beginning. Tea in the mornings became a habit. Eleanor did not come every day, sometimes every other day, sometimes every third. At times, she would leave the tea and go. At others, she would sit and speak for a while. James never asked. He never said, "When will you come?" or "Why did you not come yesterday?" He waited. He was learning to move at Eleanor's pace. On the 14th day, Eleanor came to the garden again. They were drinking their tea and talking about the children, the winter, and something Fletcher had said. Then Eleanor asked, "Do you miss anything from London?" James thought. He truly thought. "No," he said. "Not at all. Perhaps my library. It was a large one." He paused. "But books can be moved." Eleanor said nothing. She rose, took her cup, and walked toward the gate. Then she turned back. "The children have a lesson tomorrow. They are going to draw maps. Fletcher had a good ruler, but he is ill. Do you have one?" James looked at her. "I shall see. If you do, bring it." She left. James remained where he was. She had asked him for a ruler. It was a small, ordinary thing. But Eleanor Marsh never asked anyone for anything. That night, as James searched through the drawers, there was the faintest smile on his face. On the 17th day, it rained. James was at the vineyard house reading a book. There was a knock at the door. He opened it. Eleanor was wet from the rain. In her hand was the French traveler's book James had given her. The rain had come down suddenly, and this was the nearest place. "Come in," James said. Eleanor stepped inside. James brought her a towel. Eleanor dried her hair. Then they went into the small sitting room. The fire was burning. They sat down. Eleanor opened the book. This man's section on France is full of errors. Which part? Provence. It is not right at all. Have you been to Provence? No. She turned the page. But there is another book that describes it far better. When you read this one, it is obvious the man never went there at all. James laughed. Eleanor looked at him. Then that small, involuntary smile crossed her face. The rain beat against the roof, the fire burned, and the two of them sat there talking about books. It was late when Eleanor stood up. "I should go," she said. "It is still raining. It will pass." She walked to the door. She stopped. Then she turned back. "James." It was the first time she had said his name. James did not move. Eleanor fell silent for a moment. Then all she said was, "Good night," and she left. James closed the door. He went and sat by the fire. She had said his name. On the morning of the 21st day, James was in the garden. The week before, he had planted mint. The leaves in one of the pots had wilted. Too much water. He laughed to himself. Then he heard footsteps. Eleanor had come. There was no tea this time. She simply stood there, looking at the garden, at James, at the mint. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I planted mint. One of them wilted. Too much water." "I know. I realized it too late." Eleanor stepped inside. She touched the soil in the pot. "It can be saved. Leave it alone for a few days." She straightened and looked at James. There were 2 steps between them. "Why are you living here?" she asked. That was what she had come to ask. "I am simply living here, Eleanor. Nothing more." "Here?" "Yes." "You left your London behind." "I did." "Why?" James looked at her. It was a long, calm, unguarded look. "Because you are here." There was silence. The wind passed through the garden. The mint leaves trembled. For a moment, Eleanor's gaze softened. Then, she looked at the ground. "You will regret it," she said. "This life is not your life. One day, you will grow bored. You will miss it. And then you will leave. I will remain here. Again. Again." James heard that word. There was another story behind it, but he did not ask. "That life was never mine," he said. "The parties, the society, the expectations, they were things put upon me." Eleanor looked at him. "Here I wake in the morning. I tend the garden. I drink tea with Fletcher. I buy my own bread." He paused. "And you are here. That is not enough. For now, it is. And tomorrow? Tomorrow too. And the day after? Eleanor." James took one step forward. "I cannot make you promises. I cannot know the future. But I am here now. The deed is in my name. My case is small. And I planted my mint." Eleanor looked at the mint. She looked at the garden. She looked at James. Her eyes filled. She did not cry. But they filled, and she could not hide it. Something broke. Something small. But it broke. Eleanor took one step forward. She did not take the second. But she had taken the first. James stayed where he was. He waited. This time, Eleanor looked at him directly. She was still cautious, but she was no longer running. "Save your mint first," she said. James looked at her. "You gave it too much water. Wait a few days. Let the soil dry." She turned and walked to the gate. It needs patience. She left. James remained in the garden. He looked at the mint, at the wilted leaves, at the wet soil. He laughed. She had said it needs patience. She was talking about the plant. She was not talking only about the plant. That afternoon, James went to Fletcher's shop. Fletcher looked at his face. "What has happened to you today?" "Nothing. You are smiling." "Am I?" Fletcher poured the tea. "Then something good must have happened." James took his tea. "Yes," he said. "Something good happened." Winter came. James saw the first snow from the window of the vineyard house. It fell quietly, painting the town white. In London, snow would have turned dirty at once. Here, it remained untouched. James drank his coffee and stepped outside. Months had passed. By now, he was part of the town. Not entirely, perhaps, but he was no longer a stranger. Fletcher poured him tea every morning, Hartley kept his bread ready, and the owner of the inn told old stories in the evenings. James truly listened. The garden of the vineyard house had recovered as well. The mint had been saved, and new plants had been added. It was a small, modest garden, but every morning James looked at it and felt something. Perhaps, for the first time in his life, real contentment. Mr. Marsh had recovered. One day, he stopped James and shook his hand. "You sent the doctor," he said. "I heard that you were unwell." "Thank you." The old man did not let go of his hand at once. He looked at James for a long time. "You know Eleanor now?" "Yes. She is a good girl." "I know." Mr. Marsh released his hand. "Would you care for some coffee? The school has warmed up since morning." They drank coffee. They spoke of the school, the children, and the needs of the town. Mr. Marsh was an intelligent, careful man. It was easy to see where Eleanor came from. As James walked home, he was carrying something warm inside him. He tried to remember what the word family was supposed to feel like. The days passed. Morning tea between Eleanor and James settled into a rhythm. Not every day, but most days. Sometimes they sat in the garden, sometimes at the school door, sometimes on the bench in the square. They talked, and sometimes they were simply quiet. The silence no longer troubled either of them. One day, as though she were saying something unimportant, Eleanor said, "My father likes you." James looked at her. "Does he?" "He does not speak much, but when he likes someone, it shows." Eleanor looked down at her cup. "I am the same." James said nothing, but as he walked home that day, his steps felt light. One evening, there was a small meeting at the inn. Winter preparations, the roads, firewood, those in need. James went as well. No one had invited him, but no one was surprised either. He sat and listened. Then he spoke. The stable at the vineyard house was large and unused. He could open it to those who needed it during the winter. Everyone looked at him. Fletcher laughed. "Calloway has spoken." They laughed. James laughed too. That night, Eleanor saw him as she was leaving the inn. "You attended the meeting." "I did." "You were not invited." "I know." That small, involuntary smile crossed Eleanor's face. "Good evening," she said. "Good evening, Eleanor." The snow grew deeper. One morning, James rose early. Snow had blocked the road to the school. He took a shovel and cleared the path. When Eleanor arrived, she stopped. The road was open. The snow had been piled neatly to the sides. She looked around. James was in the garden of the vineyard house, setting down the shovel and going inside. Eleanor looked for a long time. Then she opened the school door and went inside. But there was something on her face. Behind those walls. Small. But there. February came. One afternoon, Eleanor was alone at the school. James knocked on the door and stepped inside. He was holding a thin, wrapped parcel. "What is this?" Eleanor asked. "The Provence book. The one that tells it properly, in answer to that French traveler. Thomas found it in London." Eleanor took it. She opened it. She turned the pages. Then she lifted her head and looked at James. This time, there was something warm in her gaze. "Thank you," she said. She did not send it back. March came. The snow melted. The gardens began to green again. James's mint came up. One morning, Eleanor came to the vineyard house and looked at the garden. "You saved it." "I was patient," James said. Eleanor looked at the mint, then at James. "I was patient too," she said. "For a long time. A very long time." James looked at her. "I know. It is tiring. I know." It was as though an old wound passed through Eleanor. It did not disappear completely, but it passed. "Shall I make tea?" she asked. "You shall." They went inside. April came. The town grew warmer, and in the school garden, the children planted tomatoes from seeds James had brought. One afternoon after school, Eleanor was in the classroom when James entered carrying 2 cups of tea. He set one down and said, "There is something I need." "What?" He looked at her directly. "I want to marry you." Eleanor studied him. This time, "Did you think before asking?" "I have been thinking for months, since the first day I came to town." Something passed through her eyes. Old years, closed doors, lonely mornings. Then she stood, walked to him, and held out her hand. James took it. She said nothing. But it was yes. They were married in June, in the town, with everyone there. Fletcher cried and denied it. Mr. Marsh walked Eleanor forward. She wore a simple dress and carried flowers from the garden. She was perfect. James looked at her, and this time what he felt was no longer curiosity. It was home. They settled in the vineyard house. Eleanor continued with the school, and James worked the land until the neglected place slowly became a small farm. Letters came from London, but James answered only some and ignored the rest. The newspapers said he had vanished into the country. He did not care. One evening in their first year, they sat in the garden where James's mint had spread widely. "Do you ever think of London?" Eleanor asked. "No. Not at all? Sometimes I think of the library." Eleanor laughed. "I wrote to Thomas. He is sending the books." James looked at her. "You did not ask me." "I knew what you would say." He laughed. 2 years later, over breakfast, Eleanor told him she was expecting a child. James stood so fast he overturned the table, but he did not care. He went straight to her. "I was expecting it," he said, his eyes full. "But hearing it..." He could not finish. It was a boy. Mr. Marsh gave him his name, William Marsh Calloway. When James held him for the first time, he understood something he had been searching for all his life. The years passed. William grew with Eleanor's eyes and James's stubbornness. He learned from his grandfather, worked in the garden with his father, and grew up known by the town. Then Mr. Marsh grew old. One morning, he could not rise. It was a slow, peaceful passing. Eleanor and James were beside him. At the end, the old man looked at them both. He said nothing, but he was content. One autumn day, James sat in the garden while William was at school and Eleanor was inside. He looked at the mint, still growing after all those years. He had saved it. He had been patient. Eleanor came out with 2 cups of tea and sat beside him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Nothing," James said. "You are lying." "A little. What were you thinking?" James looked at the garden and answered honestly. I was thinking that I am here, he said. Simply that I am here. Eleanor leaned against his shoulder. The town went on around them. Their tea grew cold. They did not rise. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Let me know in the comments which city you're watching from, and share your thoughts about the story. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.